So what's that old saying? It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. Which is exactly what's going through my mind when I see someone who dailies a 911 Turbo S, an R8, or some other 600 horsepower car. But then it dawned on me, you and I rarely get a second bite at the apple at these things, or at least one like this. So why don't you and I be that guy that dailies a 600 horsepower car? Because hell, we already drove the car. Let's do something a bit different. So let's take a 600 horsepower car to a place you absolutely positively have to take it, and then let's take a 600 horsepower car to a place you absolutely positively shouldn't. Okay, so here we are again, F90, M5. But this time we have home court advantage back at Moto Canyon with all 600 horsepower. And here, I don't think we need to talk about whether this thing is fast. We determined that out at Thermal Racetrack. Here, I feel like I need to do a public service announcement. It's not the usual fast. We understand that it's not explosive power, although you might think it is. It's linear power. But when we're in this like most basic mode, which is comfort on everything, there is a time, like even coming around like a small turn like this, you can get yourself into trouble real quick. Trouble you can't get out of. So rather than say it's fast, let me say that here's a Achtung or a Hinweis that you need to understand the weapon this thing is before you take it out to roads like this and treat it with respect and kindness. I think Spider-Man put it best. With great power comes great responsibility, and it couldn't apply more in this case. Okay, but let's put the public service announcements aside and start having some fun here. And I've programmed fun, or really I should say safety, into this M2 button here. And that gives us full throttle on everything except for the engine, because we really don't need any extra throttle mapping or speed. Let's put our foot into it, and here is where you feel the suspension is matched to the engine, so you can get the most out of the engine here. We're not really talking driving dynamics, we're talking about pulling, pushing power, whatever you want to call it, because right now we are in the all-wheel drive mode. But here's an instance where it really matters. We got a nice elevation change. Let's put our foot into it and see how we can pull 4,370 pounds up a hill. And I'm sorry, man. It just puts a smile on your face. Not quite GT3 smile, but damn close. But what's the net of using this much horsepower in everyday situations like this? We come to a stop sign. Yeah, it's in the canyons, but it's still a stop sign. And we drive like reasonable, normal adults, signal on, and just drive like we're going to church. And this is where I want to be a little serious here. We're getting cars like this, 600-700 horsepower, and they are absolutely a weapon. And I think the difference between this and like an E39 M5 way back in the day, I truly believe this takes more forethought. It takes more, you need to be an adult to understand when and where to use that much power. How many of you have seen our Inside the MotoMan Studio with Hurley Haywood? Hopefully you did, and if you haven't, you gotta go check it out. Because you have to learn how to drive a bad car fast. Now, sounds kind of odd coming from the most winning long-distance race car driver in the world, but the logic is very simple. Not every car or every situation is perfect, and you have to understand how to use the car as well as its power and its driving dynamics when things are less than perfect. And here is a great example. We already discussed this is an incredibly fast car, sometimes too fast in different settings. That's why the folks at MotoMan have blessed this with a number of adjustments to it. We talked about the tech review. It's got 2 types of dynamic braking control, multiple types of stability control, and all of it can be adjusted. Like for example, here there are 3 different buttons, and you can manually adjust the steering, the throttle mapping, and the dampers all separate from each other. But I would argue the thing that stands out the most here is what we talk about the least, And that's all the bushings that have been changed. Like the folks at MotoManTV, they have completely changed every bushing in this car to the point where even the most comfort setting, this one here, you still have some stiffness to it because there's less flexibility in the suspension by design. This is your abilities, driver abilities, not so much the car. And yeah, it's still fast, it can still go around corners, but as you can tell, it's a little bit more compliant and you bounce around a bit more. So you have to manhandle it more to get almost the same amount of driving dynamics out of it. Friends, I feel we've had enough of this being prudent. It's high time you and I go 20,000 leagues underneath the sea, and to do so we have to program this thing like it's from NASA. So let's do step one, which is press and hold this button here, and the dynamic stability system will shut off. There it goes. Then we have a shortcut to the X-Drive system, and there we're presented with three choices. Four-wheel drive, which, don't you think we've done enough of that already? And then four-wheel drive sport, which we don't need no stinking four-wheel drive. Then we go to the third option. And in the third option, what you and I have just done is we've cut the torque from going to the front wheels. Not the computer, not some 650 millisecond processing. No, it's you and I and our brains have just shut off 50% of the drive system of this car. I think the only way to put that is wunderbar. Now with that, let's go back to E39 times, put our foot into this thing, and the first thing you notice is you have so much more control over the car. You are not manhandling the steering wheel that's trying to deal in two planes of motion. The car almost feels lighter, feels more lively in this mode. Like for example, let's go around this turn here with just the rear wheels, and you can get a little bit more fun with it. God, man, it's old world, it's old feel, it's old school, it's old everything, but it's exactly what you want. Coming out of there, you can get a little bit more squat when you're in two-wheel drive than four-wheel drive, which kind of is to be expected. And if I'm honest, this is the way I've been driving the car, even around town, because it transforms the personality, and that is the biggest thing here. By changing the all-wheel drive system, by giving you the ability, meaning you the human, not the computer, think about that for a minute. Shutting off the whole drive system in the front, that's like usually reserved for like old Jeeps where you pull a lever. Call me crazy, I'd still like to have the old lever, it'd be more fulfilling to switch between two and four-wheel drive. But here's where the rubber really meets the road. Come around this beautiful declining radius turn elevation change in old school mode, I think that's what we're gonna call it. And it's, you drive the car more than it drives the car. It's like the difference between a GTR and a 240Z. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you do get that feeling of you are totally in control when you completely shut off everything up there. So in the tech review, I hinted that there may be some lightweighting going on in a car that weighs almost 4,400 pounds. Let's start with something that is as subtle as a brick, and that will be the roof. But it's not what you think. It ain't carbon fiber, it's carbon fiber reinforced polymer. Now let's press on to some of the things that are not quite as apparent. That would be the hood and the fenders, lightweight aluminum. Then the rear suspension. Now I know I shared with you a number of parts that have been replaced for something that is either stronger and or lighter. Well, there's a part that was added, and it's the cross brace. So it adds structure, but it also lowers the overall weight of the unit back there. The strut towers in the back have additional bracing, aluminum as well. Then in the front, the strut towers also have an additional brace, but it goes to the firewall. Now, putting it all together, is it a huge amount of weight savings over a serial production G35 series? Not exactly, but if you're adding horsepower, any weight reduction is definitely welcomed. However, if you're living with this thing every day, throw me a bone here and at least give me the option for a sunroof. Of course, it's the middle of the day, 1:30 p.m. This is why LA, or really, for those of you that live in like DC and Atlanta, and you like poo-poo LA and say, oh my God, the traffic there, I could never live with it. Your traffic is a million times worse than the traffic here. The only thing we got over you is our traffic is unpredictable. Yours is at predictable times. But 1:30 p.m., man, middle of the day, and this is just unusable. This is why, if you're going to effectively live in Los Angeles, you need to live and work in the same part of town. I mean, if you're going to live with a car, this is one of the things you're going to have to deal with. First thing you notice is it is a much different suspension than a serial production G30 5 Series, and that has to do with those bushings that we talked about, even in the most basic setting, which actually I'm not in. So let's go back. Now we're in the comfort setting, and you still feel a stiffness to it. As we get really close to our exit, but still painfully far away with this ridiculous midday traffic, the transmission. So I told you in the tech review that there are adjustments to the transmission, and basically it does two things. It adjusts the speed of the transmission, and it also adjusts the point at which it shifts. So the idea is to be able to hold the gears longer. So now as we finally get some speed going here behind a Toyota minivan, let's put our foot into it. This is the most basic mode of the transmission. Notice it downshift pretty quick, but then it'll upshift to maintain fuel economy in this mode. Works fine around town, and this is kind of what you want to use around town. You can even go through, there's like 5 different settings in the M or X drive settings within the computer to get this set up before you even get into these adjustments. But let's go up to full fat, put our foot into it on this land, and notice it's holding the gear. It's not going to downshift. But the real benefit of this is you don't have to like dig deep into buried menus to change the transmission. There's this very quick adjustment here. Like right now, we just came off of that exit ramp where I was pushing a little harder. Let's say I've got the end of the freeway, I'm going to get into some stop and go traffic, then I can turn this down to the most basic mode, and then it upshifts to improve the fuel economy. Now I'm in 8th gear as opposed to 6th, and I'm still going at the same speed. Okay, we got a 993 turbo in front of us, so let's go back up to full fat on the transmission. And one more note here, that is the seat, especially when you're putting yourself, or really pushing yourself back into the seat trying to catch this thing. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of support here, which we talked about in the tech review. But the thing you notice the most, especially when you're living with it on a daily basis, and not just in the canyons, the shoulder support. Like, I haven't felt this in an OEM car, like an OEM seat. I don't think ever. Yeah, they look weird. They look like they're from a spaceship, but it's amazing how well the shoulder support works and is adjustable. Anyway, I think that's it for living with this thing. So I'm going to get off the freeway, and now we got to get back to having some fun with it. Back to the canyons. So what exactly did we learn by living with a 600 horsepower car on a daily basis? Other than if you strap cameras to said 600 horsepower car and attempt to enter any LA freeway, you will be a magnet for the worst traffic I have seen in the past 3 months. That aside, what we really learned was power, it ain't everything. Think back to the days of the E28 or E39 M5. There was really no competition for those cars, very little competition in terms of a blend of power, driving dynamics, and practicality. But today, Camaros have this kind of power. In fact, there are some Camaros that have more power and can go around corners. Yeah, there's the Hellcats and Demons that have way more power, but they can't go around corners like this thing can. And that's the thing about the F90 M5. It's not about what's underneath the hood. Anybody can add a lot of horsepower. It's about what's underneath the car. And look what we did, man. All of that like spaceship kind of programming. This thing is like flying an airplane between the dynamic stability control, turning off the front wheels, the brake cornering controls, all the different adjustments. Transform it from being a weapon that you can really hurt yourself in to a scalpel going around those canyon roads and on the racetrack like we saw in the previous episode. And I would argue that this, with the changes in all the dynamics and bushings and all that kind of stuff, make this stand out amongst its competition, except for one. And here, I'm willing to share with you a little bit of a futuring of what's coming up on the show. In about 2-3 weeks, it's direct competitor from just maybe, what, 100 miles away is going to be sitting right there. So you and I will be able to answer the question, which one's better, the F90 M5 or the E63? But in the interim, I want to leave you guys with a question. And the question is this: if you had to choose between any car that had 600 horsepower or more, brand new, what would it be and why? So for the avoidance of doubt, this could be about AMGs and BMWs, but we can include Camaros and Corvettes and Cadillacs and all that kind of stuff. Let me know what you would choose, why you would choose it, and for good measure, let me know what you currently drive and where you're hailed from. Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all in word, MotoManTV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And before I go, I do want to leave you with one little hint advice again about that E63. I promise you, it is going to be the best version of that car you will want to see. So make sure you come back for that. Until I see you next time, be better.